So we left off, playing this game here, and I did some code. I created a special attack, which was all the 360 kind of ridiculous bullets that are shot. When I pull up the next game here, this is day 10 and 11, day 12 and 13. Really don't look like they changed much. There's one big noticeable difference, but otherwise, what the next couple videos I'm going to be making are going to do is not really change too much of the functionality or how the game works. It's more or less going to make the code cleaner, make it a little bit more nice, shorter. I doubt that any of you have gotten into anything in programming if you took it as a 7th grader into inheritance and polymorphism, and it just pretty much means there's certain things in this game that are similar to each other. They can be kind of categorized, like a player is similar to an enemy, other than I can control the player and the enemy is controlled by random functions in the computer. But they more or less behave the same. They move around. They are boxes in this case. They can be destroyed or killed or whatever you want to call it. The enemies could shoot bullets, which is one of the things that'll be coming up in the next couple episodes that I do. But otherwise, right now we kind of treat them in the code as their own separate things. So I have, if I look at day 10 here, I have a randomly generate enemy function, or I randomly generate some attributes for the player. I guess those ones aren't random, but the upgrades are randomly generated. We've got a random generate upgrade, even though they all are boxes, they all occupy space on that canvas, that box on the Chrome browser. Bullets too, they're also represented by boxes. They have an X and a Y, they move around. There are differences between them, but there's a lot of similarities. So what we're gonna do over the course of the next couple episodes is clean up a lot of this code and start to make it more efficient and easier to maintain or change in the future. So some of the small changes that happened in this episode, the only one that's really visible from a game player standpoint is the special attack is no longer a big circle. It is 3 bullets. Okay, just a minute. Okay, so let's take a look at some of the things that made that change happen here. And one of the things that I want to point out is how we did attacks before. Let's see, when I clicked on mouse move, unclick. Okay, so I just had the code in the onclick and I said the player attack went to 0, so they couldn't attack again right away, and they randomly generate a bullet. So they call that function that creates a bullet, and it's going to randomly generate it. Okay. Then the 360, I looped through and I made an angle, a bullet for every angle between 0 and 360, meaning it was a giant circle. So if I take a look at those on-click methods in day 12 and 13, now what I'm doing is I'm performing an attack. And then I created a separate function for performing an attack. And I'm using a new name for a variable here that's going to hold my, in this case, the player object, my player's attributes or stuff in memory. So I'm putting player in here, and if my player's attack counter is greater than 25, I will make 1 bullet, and my attack counter will go down to 0. it didn't change anything. That's literally what I'm doing. I called randomly generate bullet for player. I put my attack counter to 0, but I created a new function and made it a little bit less specific. So I called it an actor, meaning something that's moving around on my game. So now if I wanted to, I could, not when I click, but let's say I wanted to every so often create a bullet for an enemy. I would do enemy list and whatever the enemy list ID was. So I guess it would be in these brackets. So however you do the ID for that, you would call that, and then your enemies would create a bullet every time that you clicked. So it makes it a little bit more functional. Before, when I just had it this way, I would have had to copy and paste this code over and over and over for every enemy, and I would have to change enemy here, but when I punch it into its own function, this perform attack, now whatever object I put in here is going to shoot a bullet. So that's my increase in efficiency here, as I have a function for my on-click to perform an attack, and I store it as an actor. So I did something similar for the right-click. The document on context menu is the real fancy name for the right-click. So instead of having this code up here, I created another function, just like I did for the single, clear the left click. And what I do now, instead of looping through from 0 to 360 and doing a big circle of bullets, now I just take the aim angle based on where my mouse is and my player, and I add 5 to it, and I subtract 5 from it, and I generate 3 bullets that way. So I have one that goes right where my mouse is, one that goes a little bit to the right or positive 5 degrees, and one that goes negative 5 degrees. Okay. So what we're going to do is kind of expand on this actor concept here, because all of these, an update, oops, where is not an update, a bullet, an upgrade, an enemy, and a player all have very similar attributes. There's some differences, like an enemy doesn't need to know if it's pressing left, right, up, or down, but we do, so we can move. So we're going to take the stuff that's similar in all of these objects that are floating around my screen and greatly reduce the length of this code. So if you look over on this side, this shows all of my code, and I can drag my screen. Right now, my code is pretty long. If